Esther, welcome to Africa Good Morning. Not welcome back. Good morning and welcome to Africa Good Morning, where we will be bringing you the latest in news stories from across the continent and beyond. My name is Glenna Rashipura and this is Aina Raisa Kweyo.
Happy Tuesday, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us. Now, today is Mother Ocean Day. Water is essential to human life. In fact, it is essential to all of the forms of life known to humankind in general, as there are no known species that can survive without it. Now let's have a look at Mother Ocean Day. This is Africa Good Morning, your #1 source for decentralized African news. Now let's start. Dozens, including a baby, killed in a raid in DRC gold mine. Now at least 35 people have been killed after armed men raided an artisanal gold mine in Ituri in the northeast of the Democratic Republic of Congo. This comes 2 days after the commemoration of the first year of the state of siege in Ituri. Jean-Pierre Bikilisende, mayor of the rural commune Magwalu in Judu territory, confirmed the attack to AFP, alleging that the Cooperative for the Development of Congo carried out the attack on the mine. A 4-year-old month baby and a woman were among the dead. This toll is provincial, as there are no civilians killed whose bodies were thrown into gold pits, and several other civilians are missing, Biliki Sende said.
In our next story, Nigeria accused of injustice over #EndSARS deaths. Nigerian authorities have been accused of failing to ensure justice for the killing of #EndSARS protesters in 2020, 6 months after a judicial panel implicated security forces. Now, Human Rights Watch has tasked the government to act on the panel's recommendations and hold those responsible to account. Now, the report of the Judicial Panel of Inquiry should not be swept under the rug without any consequences for those responsible for killing and injuring protesters, it said. In a statement, it said failure to act on the panel's recommendations will send a painful message to victims and risk encouraging more violence by security officers. Hundreds of young people took to the streets of major cities in Nigeria in October 2020 to call for the disbandment of a police unit known as the Special Anti-Robbery Squad in a movement dubbed #EndSARS. Now, a panel set up by the Lagos state government in the wake of the protests found in November last year that security forces shot, injured, and killed unarmed protesters. It recommended disciplinary measures and prosecutions of army and police officers implicated, as well as payment of compensation to victims.
In our next story, Bekinaba inmates at large after gang empties prison. Militants freed about 60 inmates, the entire prison population, during an overnight attack on a jail in northwest Burkina Faso. The armed men entered the town of Nuna around midnight aboard 4x4 vehicles and motorbikes, brandishing Kelavanskova and heavy machine guns. They ransacked offices and set fires to prison vehicles before making their escape. The raid came after militants killed at least 12 people in northern Burkina Faso, most of them members of the volunteer militia. The country is battling a jihadist insurgency that's been spreading across the Sahel over the past decade. A military government seized power in January and ousted President Roch Kabore, blaming him for failing to tackle the jihadist insurgency.
Moving over to Tanzania, President Samai holds an emergency meeting at State House on fuel prices. Now, President Samia Suluhu Hassan has directed ministries and authorities responsible to address immediately fuel price hike and come up with a quick solution. Now, the president was speaking at an emergency meeting at the State House, Dar es Salaam, in the late hours of Sunday night. Now, fuel prices in Tanzania have crossed the 3,000 Tanzanian shilling mark across all three products: petrol, diesel, and kerosene in Dar es Salaam, Tanga, and Mtwara. According to the latest price list released by the Energy and Water Utilities Regulatory Authority, now precipitated by the U.S.-led sanctions in response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, fuel prices in Tanzania have soared, rising by 1,000 Tanzanian shillings during the past 1 year. Now, this has sent transport costs up and exerted pressure on the prices of various other goods and services that need to be transported to the market. Speaking in Parliament on May 6, Energy Minister January Makaba said the government was aware of the public outcry over exorbitant fuel prices and revealed that it was doing everything possible to work on factors that were within its control.
In our next story, cholera outbreak hits a camp of southern Sudan displaced. South Sudan Health Ministry has declared a cholera outbreak in Rubkona country in the North oil-producing Unity State. A total of 31 cases, including one death, have been reported from Rubkona town and Bitiu camp for the internally displaced persons, it said. Samples taken to the National Public Health Laboratory in the capital, Juba, returned positive tests. The Ministry of Health and partners are conducting further cases search in the household and their neighborhoods to identify additional cholera cases following a steady rise in acute watery diarrhea cases reported in both Bentiu and Rubkona IDP camps and the host community. The statement added displaced people in Unity State live in congested areas where water sources are highly contaminated. We will be right back after the short commercial break with more news. Stay with us.
Adam Tas is coming to Windhoek to help build a brighter future for education. Join us at the Sounds of Caring concert at Windhoek High School Vegkop on 20 and 21 May, where he will be performing with Von Arends and Rian Smith. Tickets cost $200 Namibian and are available via eticket.my.na. All proceeds go towards the African Child Development Trust.
This is Africa Good Morning, still bringing you the latest in news stories. In our next story, Tanzania targets 70 accredited blood transfusion centers. Tanzania targets to have 70 accredited blood transfusion centers that meet international standards by 2023 in order to sell some of its blood products to other African countries. Now, some of the blood products that can be made from liquid blood portion and could be sold to foreign countries include fresh blood, plasma, and platelets. Government Chief Medical Officer Saitiole Laser made the remarks yesterday when the Africa Society for Blood Transfusion approved 6 zonal blood centers with international accreditation, thus improving blood transfusion safety. Now, the approval of 6 zonal blood centers adds to a total number of 50 blood transfusion centers and puts the country in the 3rd position in Africa for having blood transfusion centers that meet international standards, he said. Now, Mr. Laser stressed they are happy that Zanzibar has also not been left out. This means wherever Wananchi requires to access quality and safe blood transfusion, they can have it anywhere across the country.
In our next story, 1,000 abandoned HIV drugs in Mozambique. The authorities in Mozambique says over 14,000 HIV patients have abandoned antiretroviral therapy in the first 3 months of their year in the central province of Zambezia. Male patients form the largest part of those no longer taking the drugs, according to Dr. Chennai Verezimo, the provincial head of HIV program in the region. He blames stigma and prejudice associated with HIV for the high rate of the defaulters. Over 300,000 patients receive HIV antiretroviral care in Zambezia province. The challenge we have now is in relation to those patients who drop out. If the person abandons treatment, the virus automatically gains more strength. The person gets sick and can even, in some cases, lead to death, Dr. Verissimo said. He said health officials will be delivering medicine at their homes to patients who are unable to go to health units, whether out of sickness or fear of being stigmatized.
In some rather good news, Zanzibar increases salaries of public servants by up to 19%. The revolutionary government of Zanzibar is increasing the minimum wage of public servants by between 15.6 and 19%. President Hussein Mwinyi said yesterday. Now, addressing workers at Maisara grounds yesterday, Dr. Mwinyi said the government will spend 12.7 billion shillings each month in the 2022 to 2023 financial year to cater for the salary increases. Now, in his address, which marked the commemoration of this year's International Workers' Day celebration in the Isles, Dr. Mwinyi said the increase means that the minimum wage for public servant who was employed in 2019 will rise from 300,000 shillings to 347,000 shillings per month in the coming financial year. Now, the International Workers' Day celebrations, which is usually marked on 1 May, was delayed in Zanzibar as the government sought to give public servants a chance to celebrate the Eid al-Fitr holiday. Now, in the same vein, a public servant who holds a certificate in any course in arts and who was employed in 2019 will have his salary rise from 321,000 shillings to 382,000 shillings, representing an increase of 19%, said Dr. Mwinyi.
In our next story, President Farmayo announces candidacy for 2nd term. Somalia President Mohamed Abdullahi, also known as Farmayo, has announced his candidacy for a 2nd term. Last Thursday, the parliamentary committee in charge of organizing the election announced that presidential elections would be taking place on the 15th of May. President Farmayo's mandate ended in February last year, but he stayed on amid a delay in holding of parliamentary elections. The president faces stiff competition from several candidates, including 2 former presidents. In Somalia, the president is elected by members of the parliament and senators. To be elected, a candidate must receive at least 2/3 of the votes, or 184 votes.
Zambia seeks debt reduction as part of restructuring package, President Hichilema says. Now, Zambia's President Hakainde Hichilema is pleased China will co-chair a creditor committee with France during debt negotiations, he told Reuters on Monday, adding that a partial write-off of the country's 32 billion debt was on the table. Now, Hichilema said Zambia aims to avoid another debt default after it became, in 2020, the first country in the pandemic era to default on its debt. Now, Zambia, Africa's second biggest copper producer, is struggling to jumpstart its economy as it grapples with a debt load reaching 120% of GDP. Since Hichilema's election last August, Zambia has implemented business-friendly reforms and investor sentiment has improved, with the kwacha currency increasing in value against the dollar. Now, Zambia's debt totaled $31.74 billion at the end of 2021, according to official government data, of which $17.27 billion was external debt. China held $5.78 billion of the external debt. Now, the first meeting of the creditor committee is expected to take place next week. Finance Minister Situmbeko Musokwa-Twane told Reuters in the same interview. He reiterated that debt talks should end in June, a timeline analysts consider ambitious. Now, Musokwa-Twane had previously said that debt negotiations were stalled at International Monetary Fund meetings last month after Zambia secured a staff-level agreement on a $1.4 billion three-year credit facility with the fund in December. Now, Zambia aims to increase copper production more than threefold to 3 million tons of copper a year within the next decade. The country produced 800,696 tons of copper in 2021. It also aims to increase production of wheat and maize in order to export. Now, Hichilema said, adding that the country has held talks with the European Union, among others, about providing wheat to the bloc.
All right, those have been our top stories headlining on the African continent. When we return from the break, we tell you why Hage Mukwenje is 500,000 Namibian dollars richer. Thank you for rising with the stars right here on Africa Good Morning. Now, visual artist Hage Mukwenje created a work of art at the recent Energy Conference in Windhoek, where the Minister of Mines and Energy, Tom Alwendo, then proposed that the painting be auctioned at the event. Bidding started at 50,000 Namibian dollars, and the final bid of 500,000 Namibian dollars is thought to be the highest price ever paid to a local artist for his work. Tanya Bauze spoke to him about his painting and his life as an artist. Let's have a look.
That name is Hage Mukwenje, and I'm from the northern part of Namibia. I was born and raised there, Kalongo. It's close to the border of Angola and Namibia.
Tell me about the painting that you sold recently now.
Yeah. So I was invited by Rich Africa. Rich Africa was hosting an energy conference in Windhoek last month on the 20th, from the 19th until the 21st. Yeah, so I was invited as a guest artist to perform alongside with one of the most greatest you call it saxophone, the instrument, Susie Aces. It was also really my honor to perform with her that was a very good opportunity. And so what we were doing is that it's an improvisation where she's playing a sound and then I'm painting. And it's a duration of 15 minutes. And then we take a break and then we come back for 15 minutes. So the duration of this painting was 30 minutes altogether. So, well, this painting, what I painted was a woman with a clay pot, a woman crafting a clay pot, and I painted it upside down. So, well, I think what fascinates, because the comments I got was like, how I started this painting, it was upside down, and then I was painting, rotating the canvas. First of all, people didn't know what was going on, and they were very curious until how I completed it when I flip it up, and then they could see the woman with a clay pot. And I never had the plan I didn't know it's going to be auctioned. The Minister of Mines and Energy, Tom Arendo, he really appreciates art. He grabbed the mic. He was not a guest speaker on that moment. Like he just stood up and grabbed the mic, and he called me up on the stage to tell a story to say about this painting was the inspiration. And I told him, no, the inspiration, where it's coming from. And then he started bidding it. And I was like, wow, it's happening. And then I think it's, yeah, can you imagine, I even forgot. It started, I think, the price was 50,000. And then as people started, and from there, that's when I was like, wow, it's not even halfway, but I was already like, wow, it's crazy. And then I see it going up 400,000, and then they stacked at 450, and then one moment I had was 500,000. Then they closed it up, and that was crazy. And I was saying, like, from that evening, it was a very good evening, but I didn't believe anything. I couldn't believe it. It was really crazy, like, wow, because that was also for me the highest I sold the painting. And from there, the next day I got a lot of calls from the medias and so on, radio stations, like, no, we had you sold the painting for 450, what, many stories, like different stories. And my thinking was just on the last evening, so I couldn't take in their calls, I couldn't take, because I didn't know what to say and so on. Until after a week, I had a meeting with Total Energy that bought the painting, and they told me so many good things that no, they just wanted to clarify that we love the painting from our heart and we are going to take it. It's not that maybe we drank a lot of wine and we love the painting. Yeah. We really love it. We love the story and so on. So we're going to take the painting. And then that's when I took it in for the framing and so on. And I was like, wow, it's happened. From there, that's when I started telling people, even my own people, that it just happened. I sold the painting. Because I was getting messages and so on, but I didn't know what to say and so on.
And you did a live, what you call a live painting.
That's right.
Just get up and you create something while people watch you creating.
Yes. So, well, on that day, what I was working on, I have to keep this painting as the Hage painting, as my signature. That's number one. Number two, I also had to keep it local. It's a Namibian, because the energy conference was in Namibia. So I'm trying to give something from Namibia, So, and then, so I thought of, because of my signature and so on, I thought of creating a woman, because I grew up with some aunties that were going in that hole to make clay pots and so on. I know that process very well. I've seen it. So I decided to paint a woman that was crafting a clay pot, and it was a struggling, but as you start painting, it just goes well. Yeah, and it turned out very well.
Here at Africa Good Morning, we pride ourselves on bringing you pertinent news stories. We now cross over to Botswana, speaking to Masego. Good morning, Masego.
Masego, can you hear me? Masego, we'll take a short commercial break, then we'll come back to you because we can't seem to hear you.
Can you hear me now?
All right. Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, thank you so much, Masego. Can you take us into your first story, please?
Yes. Public servants are set to get a 5% salary increase across the board for the financial year 2022 and 2020, effective from April 1st. This as inflation hovers percent and the Russia-Ukraine war pushes food prices to historic highs. The increase comes after government and the 5 unions, Bopeu, BTU, Busetu, Blau, and Bonu, have reached an agreement concluding 5 days of negotiations on salaries and conditions of service for the current and the next 2 financial years. A joint statement circulating over the weekend, the unions and the government agreed that a 5% salary adjustment for the 2022-2023 financial year will be effected very soon. Furthermore, the parties agreed to an across-the-board salary adjustment for the financial year 2023-2024, as well as a 5% across-the-board salary adjustment for the following financial year. The parties, however, deadlocked on the issue of cessation of provision of pool housing and rental subsidy or public offer.
All right, Masego, we understand that public schools are not complying with COVID-19 protocols. So why do you think that is?
Yeah, it seems that people are starting to get relaxed a bit now since a lot of the population has been vaccinated. However, the Botswana Sectors of Educators Trade Union says it is not impressed with the current state of affairs in public schools regarding COVID-19 compliance. This as schools reopen in a phased manner beginning this week. The Secretary for Occupational Health and Safety, Monica Logwale, says although there are facilities in schools which ensure COVID-19 compliance, some of them are not working, especially hand-washing facilities. She also expressed a concern that most school cleaners focus on ground cleaning rather than ensuring cleanliness inside the classrooms. Logwale said that there are no SHE officers in some schools because their contracts expired and were not reviewed. She said that the lack of SHE officers in schools is a risk as the world continues to fight against COVID-19.
And I also understand that in South Africa they've recorded some high numbers recently as well. So I wonder what the future looks like for the neighboring countries as well. The relationship between the Botswana Congress Part and the Botswana National Front continues to weaken. Can you tell us more?
Yes, the deteriorating relationship between the BNF, Botswana National Front, and the BCP, Botswana Congress Party, could be ruining the umbrella for Democratic Coalition's chances of taking over power from the ruling party in the hotly anticipated 2024 general elections. The UDC is made of the BNF, BCP, and the Botswana People's Party. Over the years, Botswana and analysts have complained at the fact that the opposition parties have a tendency of fighting over trivial issues that lead to their party breakup. This tendencies has unnecessarily extended the ruling Botswana Democratic Party's reign of power, when many have thought that the time is ripe for taking over from the government, from the country. BCP President Dumelang Saleshando this week said that the party's decision to make its own submissions at the cooperation talks is in order. So it looks like the issue right now is that not all parties in the UDC are allowed to make submissions when preparing for the general elections, and that has been the bone of contention between the BNF and the BCP, who do have the most numbers under the UDC. That brings me to the end of my stories for today. I hope you guys have an amazing week.
Thank you so much, Masako, for bringing us the latest news stories on the ground. We now cross over to the weather. Biochar, investing in the future. Now, biochar has been used for thousands of years. It can be traced back to the Amazon basin, which has some of the most carbon-rich soils on Earth. Biochar has a great potential to help Namibia adapt to climate change. It can be used to improve soil quality as well as animal health. Although this product is relatively new to the Namibian market, it fills a unique niche because it is made from encroacher bush biomass, thereby providing a sustainable solution to bush encroachment. This video, produced in collaboration with the Namibia Charcoal Association, provides an overview of biochar production and application in the country. Let's take a look.
Bush encroachment is a huge challenge for Namibia. 45 million hectares are affected. Bush encroachment reduces the productivity of rangeland, it decreases biodiversity and limits groundwater recharge. At the same time, bushes are a valuable resource. Encroacher bush can be used for a variety of products such as charcoal, animal fodder or energy production. The Namibian charcoal sector is booming and market players are excited about a new product, biochar. It looks nearly like charcoal, and it actually is charred wood. But you would not braai or barbecue on it. It's far too valuable for that. Instead, biochar helps to increase the productivity of soils by increasing their capacity to store nutrients and water, and it can be used as an animal feed supplement. Also, there's a growing international market for it. Zacchaeus Kafula is passionate about biochar and is the co-owner of a biochar-based business, Prime Biochar.
The biochar that we produce essentially comes from rangeland resources. It's from bush, which is part of the rangeland ecosystem. Instead of the charcoal, which just takes the carbon off the land and we essentially export it, the idea is take that wood, convert it into biochar, put the carbon back into the Namibian soils. So in the end, what you'll have is much higher productivity from your rangeland.
The production of biochar is quite similar to the burning of charcoal. However, you need a different kiln. Biochar is produced at higher temperatures than charcoal. Also, during the production process, it is quenched with water. This gives it an especially porous texture with a large inner surface. Because of this, it is capable to take in water, nutrients, and other materials, just like a sponge. Michael Dejay from the Namibia Charcoal Association explains this.
We are here to look at biochar, which is a valuable addition to our products on the farm. We use thin branches, everything that you can't use for boscos and what you can't use for charcoal, so it fits nicely in between. You can use any encroacher tree species in Namibia. Some of them you can't use for charcoal, but you can use all of it for your biochar because you use the thinner branches. Then coming to our production, how it's made, we use twigs that dry for about 3 months and it's then produced in a Kontiki kiln. Then we light it at the bottom. Then after we light it, we use layers of 10 centimeter. Once you see the white ash on top, we cover it again so you suffocate the layer underneath. Pyrolysis still carries on, and that's how we add layer on layer till you right on top. You can get out of a small Kontiki kiln, you can get about 500, half a ton of biochar out of that small size because you fill it to the brim. And in the end, the big difference between charcoal and biochar is it's quenched with water. The water stays in, you need to watch that it doesn't catch fire. Even if you've quenched it, you still need to guard it that it doesn't catch fire. So you tip it in the Kontiki that we use here, and then you let it just dry and stabilize a little bit before you start making it smaller. You can use a hammer mill for that. We use a normal traditional stamping tool like most farmers have it on the farm just to make it smaller parts, and then it is used in the charging process.
The use of biochar as a livestock feed supplement is a rather recent development, but already thousands of years ago, it was used by farmers in South America to increase fertility and water-holding capacity of their soils. They created the famous terra preta, which means black soils. South of Windhoek at Farm Krumhoek, biochar is used today to improve soils and productivity in the market garden.
So I'm Mareike Vogts. I'm the vegetable garden coordinator. At Krumhoek we use the biochar mainly in the garden. We sometimes also use it for the chickens. They also like eating it. But our main use is in the garden. So we include it in our soils. We first charge it with nutrients and microorganisms. And we then apply it on the soil. We dig it in a little bit so that it's just in the surface about 15 centimeters of the topsoil. I think it's really a long-term investment and it will show benefits over a longer period of time. The biochar doesn't decompose, it doesn't degrade. So it stays within the soil for hundreds and maybe even thousands of years. So if you put it into your soil once, you will keep it. So the inoculation or charging of the biochar means that before we add it to the soil, we want to include the nutrients and the microorganisms into that biochar. Because if we wouldn't do that, and we would just include the biochar raw without that charging or inoculation, it would take the nutrients and the microbes from the soil first. And the process is that we take the biochar after it's milled or crushed. We use cow manure, fresh cow manure, because that has the largest variety of microorganisms and most nutrients in that manure. We have a compost tea, we use plant teas, and we have whey left over from our dairy processing. So that also is water with lots of nutrients and also the microorganisms from the dairy processing. So those are our ingredients, and then we mix it with the biochar.
Biochar can be used domestically by both livestock and horticulture farmers to give nutrients back to the soil and to enhance its water holding capacity. This is a great benefit for a dry country like Namibia.
Thank you very much for watching Africa Good Morning. Now, in our first economic news story, Zimbabwe suspends bank lending. Authorities in Zimbabwe have ordered banks to stop lending with immediate effect on Saturday. According to the government, the decision was taken to stop speculation against the Zimbabwean dollar and was part of a raft of measures to stop its rapid devaluation on the black market. Zimbabwe reintroduced a local currency in 2019 after abandoning it in 2009 when it was hit by hyperinflation. President Emerson Mnangagwa accused unnamed speculators of borrowing Zimbabwe dollars at a below inflation interest rate and using the money to trade in foreign exchange. The devaluation of the Zimbabwe dollar's black market exchange rate has been driving up inflation. Year-on-year inflation reached 96.4% in April from 60.6% in January.
SA home buyers are now paying the smallest deposit in 14 years. South African home buyers are currently putting down the smallest deposits to buy a property in about 14 years, according to the latest FNB Residential Property Barometer. Now, the national loan-to-price ratio, the proportion of the purchase price that lenders are willing to fund, has increased to 94.9% in the first quarter of 2022. This implies a national deposit or down payment rate of slightly more than 5%. DEET's office data for all banks, not only for FNB, was used and shows this is the highest the ratio has been since the second quarter of 2008. Now, house price growth appears to have stabilized in the last few months, as the FNB House Price Index shows growth was slightly lower in April, averaging 3.9% year-on-year compared to 4.1% in March. Now, bar the sentiment shock from the ongoing geopolitical tensions and devastating floods in some parts of the country, internal market strength indicators suggest relatively resilient market activity in the near term, states the index report. Now, FNB expects interest rates in SA to increase by cumulative 150 basis points this year on the back of rising inflationary pressures exacerbated by ongoing geopolitical tensions like the war in Ukraine. Now, the SA Reserve Bank's Monetary Policy Committee hiked the repo rate by 25 basis points each in both January and March, bringing the prime rate to 7.75%. The MPC is moving to hike rates in an effort to subdue inflation, which has been heating up in recent months.
In our next story, global scramble for metals